Okay, we do have, oh, she won't. Okay, so Commissioner McCarley will not be here, so it's just the mayor and I motioning and seconding.
And he would disappear, I think.
Okay,
So read slow.
so, yes.
Where's your high back
I
chair?
can do a song and
It's over here.
dance.
Let's trade chairs on how that happens. Let's get
Have it real quick, hold on, so you
Yeah,
got chair.
just the,
So you won't fall over on me.
and the two, I like our chairs, the ones that the county commission, they don't lean back.
okay. And then there we go.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Don't you have some fervor on this committee, so
Yes,
I'll get to listen.
well, all my committee members are not here yet.
Uh-oh, can't start, can you?
There he is. I need a motioner.
Yes, ma'am, you sure do, and I am glad to be here with my tools, and apologize for being late.
Okay, so here we are at the Municipal Board Committee meeting. Started at a little late.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Okay, so we have some recommendations, and we will take them one by one. We have an Airport Advisory Board recommendation from Director Chris Hallstrand to appoint Ashley Budick to a 3-year term beginning January 1st, 2023, and ending December 31st, 2025.
So moved.
Seconded. Any discussion?
None for me.
None for me. So we will vote. All in favor of that appointment?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously, Chris. Okay. On our Planning and Zoning Board, we have a recommendation from Chief Planner Matthew Lyons to reappoint Sylvana Knight to an additional 3-year term beginning December 2nd, 2022, and ending December 1st, 2025. I would...
Motion to approve.
Okay. A second. And any discussion?
None.
Okay, so all in favor of Sylvana Knight for this appointment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. On our Nuisance and Abatement Board, we have a recommendation from the mayor. Can you make your own motion on your recommendation? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. To reappoint Terry Carter to an additional 3-year term beginning November 15th, 2022, and ending November 14th, 2025. And also to reappoint David Still to an additional 3-year term beginning November 15th, 2022, and ending November 14th, 2025.
And you make that as a motion?
I think that you'd like to motion that for
It's
your
okay, I would,
recommendation.
yes.
Okay, and I will second it, because I'm not supposed to make the motion
All right.
on my own committee, correct? Parliamentarian?
Ideal, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So I would second that. And any discussion? All in favor of these recommendations? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, here we go. That passed unanimously as well. And our fourth and final are some Lakeland History and Culture Center recommendations, also from Mayor Bill Mutz, to appoint Lynn Simpkins. Hooray! Lloyd Rustin, I should say hooray for all of them, but
Yes.
hooray for all of them. And Kelly Fisher to a 3-year term beginning October 17th, 2022, and ending October 16th, 2025. And also to appoint Del Quarry, Yvonne McShay, and Kat Eskins to a 2-year term beginning October 17th, 2022, and ending October 16th, 2024.
So moved.
Seconded. Any discussion?
None.
All in favor?
I'm really excited about
This
having
is-
this initial
yeah.
board and having it be filled out. And
This is really
taking
exciting.
it to the next first chapter.
Yes. And getting to go to the grand opening.
Yes.
Hopefully. So that's great discussion, and all in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And for information only, we do want to state that the Police Pension Board held a member election and appointed Michael Lewis to a first term beginning August 29th, 2022, and ending August 29th, 2026. And also mentioned that Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is looking for one member who is an employer within the jurisdiction. The Civil Service Board is looking for a member, and the Community Redevelopment Area Advisory Board, which Commissioner McCloud can say is riveting and exciting, and we need 2 members, one who owns property or business in the Dixieland CRA, and one in the Midtown CRA district. So anyone who lives in those districts, does business in those districts, we would love to have you apply for the CRA board. And hearing no additional business, we can adjourn.
Thank you very much. And that gives us pause until 8:30.
Okay.
we'll begin our agenda study. But what's very significant is, I think everybody knows that we have the classic car festival this weekend. But the real classic on Lake Mirror today is Commissioner Walker, because it is his 69th birthday.
Oh, yeah,
And so we want to begin. Another song. Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all. I don't know what 69 was look like or feel like, but hey, we're going on in the name of Jesus.
Yeah, it's a great celebration of the determination of your 60th decade, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
So, and gosh, you've done wonderfully well in serving in that. So we're so grateful to be able to celebrate this, because this is also our last agenda study with you. And
well, technically, no, but I don't think it'd be wise
to be
the next one, because I thought whoever we select,
right.
that person should, even though not being sworn in, should be the one here. That's what I believe would be the best thing.
Good.
So I
Good.
don't
That's
need to
good
grace
comments.
myself in your presence that morning.
Well, regardless, it'll be a transition, and the work that you have provided and the wisdom you provide to us is wonderful. And we'll talk more about that then. So for this morning, we talked about the fact we'll have two presentations, the USPCA Nationals Canine Recognition, and then the Citrus Connection update. That Nationals is always a fun presentation. Will the dogs be with us?
Likely. Yes.
Okay. All right, great. To be able to see. And then we have the proclamation. There's a proclamation of Commissioner Walker on there. So I'm sure it will be of a serious nature. And then Kiwanis Club has their centennial anniversary, which is pretty significant, and that's being celebrated. And it's World Polio Day with Rotary. So there's some competitive, proclamations, actually widely enhancing proclamations there. We'll do our committee report and related items with the municipal boards and committees of the meeting we just had, and then we will have the approval of minutes and then any asterisk items. And I saw no other asterisk items, and I'm double checking, other than minutes. So we don't have anything we have to hear earlier. So we can move right into 3A1 and listen to our city attorney.
All right, thank you. I was telling the mayor that the length of the agenda will probably not reflect how long it takes on Monday. We've got several things that will generate some discussion on Monday. There's two developments, three ordinances, but two developments for your consideration for second reading on Monday. And I think both of them have the potential to have some people here on Monday contesting those. The first one is a request to modify a PUD to allow additional multifamily units south of the Parkway. I'll let Chuck introduce that one.
Sure. This is property immediately to the east of Lockheed Martin. The request is to go from 152 multifamily units to 288 multifamily units, and to increase the height of the buildings from 2 to 3 stories. And so this is an area that's immediately east of the Oak Ridge DRI, immediately east of Lockheed Martin, and it's along the South Parkway frontage road, which is the one-way roadway between Hart Boulevard and Old 37. And so this is one that certainly got a lot of commentary and input at the Planning and Zoning public hearing. And to address those concerns, the developer has done a number of things, including shifting the buildings to the west, shifting solid waste collection facilities to the west side of the site, the amenity center, enhancing the buffer between the apartments and the development to the east, the villas. So there's been a lot that has been done by the applicant to address some of the compatibility concerns that were raised at the hearing. One of the other issues that came up was the driveway access off of South Parkway frontage. That's operated by DOT District 1, and because of the retention area along the northern frontage here, there's a very limited amount of frontage this property actually has on South Parkway frontage road. So there were a number of issues related to the driveway spacing. Lockheed Martin was only about 50 feet. Obviously a big concern with DOT operationally and from a safety standpoint. So the applicant went back, worked directly with Lockheed Martin to put together a plan for a joint driveway, which is shown here, where the Lockheed Martin's eastern driveway would be removed. This joint driveway would be constructed with a two-way access point coming in near the front of the existing office building. The traffic study estimates that there is going to be a need for an eastbound right turn lane, and so that is something that's also being worked into the mix and is one of the conditions that we have. Certainly that'll be part of DOT permitting as well. So we believe that the applicant has done a very good job of addressing the comments that were received, the DOT concerns. The other thing that's important to note too, and this came up during the hearing, is that there were some concerns about the safety and the operations of that curve between South Parkway frontage and Old 37 right there by Resurrection. And our Traffic Operations Division took a look at the crashes. There were two types of crashes. I think there were 7 over like a 3-year period. A couple of them were medical episodes, rear-end collisions. There were a number of nighttime crashes that were alcohol-related, and so the city's Traffic Operations Division is actually working on purchasing an LED sign to alert motorists as they're heading eastbound if they're entering a curve area. But their judgment was that the crashes certainly weren't high, and that it wasn't anything that was related to the development. It was other factors, even beyond the design of the roadway. So we've got that in our staff report. This shows again how the new driveway configuration would be worked out. We would require a recorded agreement between the two property owners to formalize that access point. DOT would be requiring that as well. This gets into the buffer along the eastern boundary, again, to show that it's enhanced and definitely, we'll screen this project from the neighborhood to the east. These are some renderings of the proposed buildings. And then just kind of jumping into the traffic analysis part of it, the project is going to generate a little less than 2,000 daily trips. The traffic analysis got a lot of attention at P&Z, and a lot of it's because of some work that had been done by DOT at the South Parkway Hardin intersection. About a year and a half ago, the intersection was modified so that if you're heading eastbound, instead of having 2 left turn lanes and 2 through lanes, you have now 3 left turn lanes and 1 through lane. Well, that was supposed to have been slightly different, and because of the way that project was implemented, having 1 eastbound lane created a level of service failure that caused the entire intersection to fail. So we've had conversations with DOT about what their plans originally were, which are 3 lefts, that outside left would be shared with the through, so you'd have 2 through lanes and 3 lefts. That makes the intersection operate much better. That was the intent. It just wasn't implemented the right way. And so that's something where the city's Traffic Operations Division is working with DOT to implement the signal head changes and any of the striping changes that are necessary to make that happen.
Does this seem probable?
It definitely is. That's something the District 1 recognizes was something that should have been done correctly, and so that's being worked on as we speak. Traffic analysis also addresses Oak Ridge DRI traffic. As you might remember, about 2018, the DRI was updated to vest some additional kind of the full build-out of the overall master plan, which includes a significant amount of commercial in the southeast quadrant of the Hardin Parkway interchange. So you go Lockheed Martin, auto owners, and then a large vacant area over towards Hardin Boulevard. Quite a bit of retail and a lot of residential that was entitled as part of that change. And so that traffic was also built into the analysis, so we had a very conservative analysis. The one thing that we ended up running into is that on the other side of the Parkway, North Parkway frontage at Hardin, that westbound approach during the PM peak fails. The overall intersection operates at an acceptable level of service, but that approach fails. And so one of the recommendations that came out of our Traffic Operations Division, and then what we wrote into the conditions, is that they have to work with DOT to retime that signal. And so that's something that's part of the mix as well. So the developer's working with us to address those issues. And again, I talked about the curve there at Old Highway 37 and how that's being addressed. Transit shelter will also be installed along the frontage because of the Citrus Connection's new Coral line, which serves Southwest Lakeland all the way up to Walmart. And so given the transit service here, a shelter is going to be installed by the developer. What we're showing here are the changes to the conditions. Again, going from 152 two-story units to 288 three-story units. All of them are two-bedroom apartments, and the parking. I think the parking, the required parking is 520. They're showing 562. So they are exceeding the minimum parking requirements, but are not in excess of the 10% maximum that our land development code has.
552, you say?
552. 52.
562. So again, we're going to default back to we've got the site development plan that's included as an attachment. We've got details regarding the buffers. Outdoor lighting is going to be per the code and shielded away from the surrounding neighborhoods. We have our list of transportation concurrency requirements, including the execution of a navigation easement agreement with the to acknowledge the airport's presence, given where this is located relative to the flight path for the airport. That's very common in what we have in Southwest Lakeland. We're probably up to 20 navigation easement agreements, and so it's getting pretty commonplace now. Then a lot of the access improvements are as I just discussed. And then prior to first certificate of occupancy, the developer shall submit a retiming plan for consideration by DOT.
This is good timing with Lockheed Martin because there's nothing in that building really going on today.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that doesn't preclude Lockheed Martin from leasing that space and having occupancy. So you would estimate the same level of traffic for Lockheed Martin that existed on the concurrency?
Yes, I mean it's probably how it will end up working out is the Oak Ridge traffic in actuality is probably going to be less than what's allowed, and Lockheed Martin will be more, so it will balance itself out. The other good thing too is with the cross connectivity, you'll be able to go from Lockheed Martin auto owners and work your way eventually back towards Hardin Boulevard as well. So there's going to be some interconnectivity that's going to be built in because of what was built in with Oak Ridge.
And any resistance by Lockheed Martin to this concept?
No, I did receive a call from the LEDC. I guess Lockheed Martin had contacted them concerned about the original proposal, which was a one-way connection between the two properties, and they've worked it out at least to this point, and that two-way connection is something that has been agreed to, at least in concept. We need to see the formal agreement to see what the final. But they're working together.
Questions by commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Barney, but I've always respected the fact that when we have those who serve on these various committees throughout our city, you can get a 6-0 vote. I think, in my history as being here, this has been vetted out among our citizens that we've actually served on these committees. And I respect that because, they take their time to come serve and do these things and vet this stuff for us. And of course, we ultimately, have to make the final decision. But when you think about the history, what you just indicated about, that could have landed to be a retail situation. It's supposed to be a shopping center there, if I understand, some time ago. It's a DRI. It could have been a shopping center, adjacent to what we have already, Oak Bridge, across the Parkway, another shopping center. And to have this, and then get the kind of vetting I'm sure these particular persons did, I will ask you, what more can be done to make sure we align this properly and go within the scope of what we want?
To me, this is a very appropriate scale development. I mean, we always want to have the residential next to the employment. Now, whether folks, are able or choose to work next door, the options are there, the mix of uses are there, and given what is to come or what is expected to come with Oak Ridge and everything in that area, they've addressed our comments. It's the appropriate use in the appropriate location. The original zoning was approved back before the Parkway, so it was talking about access to Drainfield Road.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that's happened over the decades, and so in terms of what we have there today, this is an appropriate use in the right location.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, this is also a very difficult property to develop, and that's why nothing has happened on it. And you can see why the additional density gives them opportunity, with that other floor. And yet, at a 45-foot height with the buffers, it's not going to be obtrusive to the surrounding area.
I bet you'll likely hear from neighboring residents on Monday. So I think there's some, when you're used to having vacant property
Yes.
near your neighborhood, that change is big, and so there may be some of that you hear on Monday. But to me, the conditions address those concerns and comments that we received through the hearing process.
Very, very good.
Thank you.
Commissioner Reed?
I really don't have any trouble with the height and stuff. We're still less than 2 units per parking space per unit, which is, nobody come visit. And if everybody has 2 cars, I don't know where everybody's going to park. And I know everybody drives a car anymore. And I still talk to you every time we need to raise these limits on I don't know if that's state or can we change that? But invariably, I think that's going to be a negative for me.
Well, and the thing is, and this is something that over the years we've really tried to clamp down on, is the excess parking, because not only is it an additional cost to the developer, but it's also an additional impervious surface that ultimately becomes a huge problem. I go back to, the past couple of weeks have told me, that there's a lot of attention being played to, technical planning, or, since, Big Cat 4 hurricane hits us. And, I keep thinking about if we had a 20-inch rain event with the amount of, shift the track 20 miles north, have 20 inches of rain here with as much paved area as we have, we would have all kinds of probably bigger problems than they're having in Harding, DeSoto, and Highlands. And that's part of the kind of the philosophy with clamping down on the parking is we have other ways where if you need the additional parking, those allowances are there if you provide pervious pavement, additional drainage, other things to offset that impact. But what we're trying to do is avoid situations where we become such a paved over area that we create additional flooding problems that are much bigger than anything we're going to see related to parking or traffic or those types of things.
Can we address some parking that would be on the impervious surface, like pavers or some kind of grass things that do that, where it's still going to perk? But there again, we need to plan for hurricanes. We're in a hurricane zone. Invariably, we didn't have to be paved over, but we could have parking. You've seen the blocks of grass in the middle, and they can park on those.
We're getting a lot of that.
Grass dies, but invariably at some point in time, it's still perk, and it's still going to be good parking. But I still have issues with less than one place per bedroom. I'm only one guy.
Well, if I could say something on that. So from a functional standpoint, it makes sense that if my kids come home, everybody's got a car. There's 5. So there's a difference between the practical and the functional. Are these apartment developers realizing that that's not the case? Is everybody not having a vehicle, so it's not an issue? And are the developers going to end up being the managers of this property? So are they going to deal with that headache when it comes up?
Hey, well, that's it. At least that's the stated intent, and certainly they'll be there to answer those questions on Monday. But they've developed around in other locations, and so what we rely on is that as long as you're within the bounds that are allowed in the Land Development Code, then we leave it up to them to and folks are definitely not shy about asking us for additional parking above our 10% maximum. And we have a process to evaluate that and be able to, so this one is, they're getting close to that 10% maximum. They haven't exceeded it. So, I think in terms of parking, they're definitely more than what the code would outright require. And so I think they're in a good balance.
Well, the other thing is, if you look at this map, they have put parking everywhere that they can.
Maybe they should have less units then.
Okay, that's another way to argue that. It just means less homes. But I was looking really to Commissioner Reed's point, where could you add some additional parking? And they have filled the fingers of this so well in terms of parking, and especially the lot that's
going out to the road.
Going out to the road, and that's a walk if you lived in those units. But if you're visiting, that's okay. Our codes that we use today and how they hit traffic concurrency on existing apartments and that balance in this formula, how well do you see that working?
I think it works well. Of course, we've only had, we're still on that front end of our multifamily boom. We've really had the 2 recently at Bridgewater, are probably the biggest biggest complexes that have come in recently, haven't heard any issues at all from out there in terms of parking, and because of their site constraints, they're within, between the minimum and maximum, they didn't get anything above what the LDC requires.
They have 3 bedrooms at Bridgewater,
They do.
and whereas this is only 2, which is, another thing to think about. Okay. We can do more of this on Monday, but any other comments or questions that you have? All right.
All right, the next 2 ordinances relate to the same development. It's a request for 252 apartment units out south of West Pipkin and east of Yates Road. John.
All right, well, thanks, Palmer. And in this one, I expect to get considerably more input on Monday from the residents of Town Park and in the residents along the east side of Yates Road. But the request is, we've got a land use change to change a portion of the remaining portion of the neighborhood activity center that exists south of Town Park Boulevard on the site. I'll just go over here to this. To residential medium, and then the remainder of the site, which totals just under 30 acres, from residential low to residential medium. The original proposal by the applicant was for 356 multifamily units. So this is another one where there have been substantial changes that have been made to the development after, and I'll just show, this is all the construction that's going on in the area. This was the original plan provided by the developer at the Planning and Zoning Board public hearing. It's going to be three 4-story buildings, all 1-bedroom units, 356 units, and that got a lot of negative commentary by the public and by the Planning and Zoning Board. Some of the other issues that we had with the application as well is there were no details on buffers, no site analyses to take a look at what the impacts would be from the surrounding neighborhoods, no details on traffic, and so we had a lot of issues with the application as it was originally presented. So following that public hearing, the developer engaged the Lens Group, who put together a plan for a much smaller product. It's 252 units, so it's the same number of units as the Mosaic property on the north side of Town Park Boulevard that was approved earlier this year. Because of the size of the property, the density is about 40% less. So it does represent a step down from what we have up at the Yates Road intersection in Pipkin Road to this property. But it respects the wetlands both on Town Park Boulevard and between the units and Songsboro Drive in the Town Park neighborhood. They've got 2 driveway connections, one off of Town Park, one off of Yates. For traffic analysis purposes, we actually had them direct most of the traffic out to Town Park, out to Yates, to see if it triggered any requirements for signalization or any additional turn lane improvements, and it doesn't. But the reality is, because the amenity center where it's located, the mail kiosk, all those things are going to be up close to the front, that Yates Road is going to get a lot more of the traffic. They've also provided additional details on the buffer, and we'll get into that here in a minute too, up along Yates Road. So if you live across the street, the buildings, not only are they 3 stories that are shorter, they're also set further back, and there's a lot more between them and the right-of-way. The line of sight analyses provided shows, the width of the wetlands, which is around 400 feet. The average height of the buildings is 35 to 40 feet. So, again, 3 stories. The diagram at the bottom kind of shows how everything would lay out as you're along Yates Road looking back to the west. So again, a lot of separation to try to be more compatible with the surrounding single-family neighborhoods that surround it. From a kind of a bulk or a layout standpoint, the development team also provided us with some renderings that showed how this project would relate to the Geico facility on the north side of Pipkin Road, as well as the existing Town Park neighborhood and those to the east of Yates Road. So when you start to look at the buffers and the wetlands that are preserved, this isn't something that stands out as much as one would think for a multifamily development in this area.
It's almost hidden.
that's the intent is to try to weave it in there as much as they can. And so, again, there was a lot of work that went into making sure that the design was as context sensitive as possible. Now, coming into the transportation side of things, one of the issues that's still outstanding and is a real concern with the town park residents is you've got a lot of interaction now and cut-through traffic from Medela Road, from Riverstone and kind of everything to the west. That interconnectivity was always built into town park, going back to when the zoning was originally approved. And so the connection to the west shifted from the north side to the south side, but we've always tried to have that to relieve Pipkin Road and to provide that interconnectivity. And that goes back to when Town Park back in the day was the development that everybody was really concerned about, because that was the first new development in southwest Lakeland. So that was all green pasture all the way out to County Line Road. So a lot of what we're hearing now is a lot of what we heard 20 years ago. So the issues with Town Park is how, and this is something we're going to have to figure out, it's not the developer's issues, how do we slow down that traffic volume on Town Park Boulevard, White Egret, White Ibis, and some of those streets. And so we've already had conversations with the development team about conditions here, but also with the Town Park neighborhood about kind of what they would like to see. I think they're looking for more raised crosswalks, kind of better intersection designs, other things that right now there's no funding in the county or the city CIP for those types of things. But we want to keep that on the radar screen, and that's going to be, I think, one of the big comments that you'll hear on Monday from the Town Park residents is that cut-through traffic, particularly speed.
Can I ask a question on that real quick?
Sure.
Is that, they're having an issue with that now?
Yes.
Okay, so then, that argument does need to be addressed, but the other development that was approved and then this development, they're not there yet. So, any issue that they're having is not an issue. It might be exacerbated by this, but it's not because of that. So
right, and that's our judgment.
Yeah.
And what we want to show in the analysis is that there is certainly going to be traffic generated by this and the Mosaic project across the street. Combined, you'll have 504 units on both sides of Town Park Boulevard that aren't there today. So there is an additional trips that aren't there today, but it's still less than the neighborhood activity center that, the land use that was there before. And just for context, this development is going to generate 99 AM and PM peak hour trips. If we were to take at residential low land use, put, single-family home on almost 30 acres, we'd have 148 single-family units. Single-family unit generates 1 PM peak hour trip. So we would have 148 PM peak hour trips with a single-family development, almost 50% more than what this apartment would be generating. So from a traffic standpoint, this generates less traffic than a single-family subdivision that could go in a residential low land use category. So we just kind of want to put that in context, but there are still some real operational issues we have to address, and we'll get into that here in a second. So because of the development in the area, the developments or the developer's traffic consultant took traffic from Hawthorne, from Riverstone, assumed an additional growth rate from Geico because, of course, they're not fully back after COVID. And based on what they've told us, what the developers told us in their conversations with Geico, they're not going to go back to the same level. So we built in an inflation factor. That the traffic includes all that in addition to Mosaic. So this is a cumulative analysis that shows how everything operates with all this development activity. We also had the developer do an AM peak analysis because of the proximity to Wagner Elementary. And that was very similar to what was done with Riverstone, same thing we did with Mosaic, and really the same thing we did with Hawthorne. So there's an AM analysis in this as well. Because, just kind of in terms of the rules of the road for the traffic study, we look at the significance area as being where the development consumes 5% of the roadway capacity. So in this instance, the project is significant on Yates Road and Pipkin Road. They included some analysis for Ewell, but they're not significant on Ewell. And Ewell starts to fail because of other approved development. So if you look at the analysis, you'll see Ewell's a failure, but it's really not, it's nothing tied to this project. It's just in there for background information. When we start looking at the AM peak, that's where the intersection at Yates and Yates and Pipkin Road fails. That's not something we look at for concurrency purposes because our concurrency standards are for the PM peak, but for AM peak, there is an issue, and we have a condition in there because the intersection is completely being rebuilt with the four laning of Pipkin and the approach to Yates. We have a condition here that they work with the county on updated signal timing to reflect the new configuration and to look at ways to make the intersection operate more efficiently. There may be some opportunities where, for example, you cannot allow U-turns and make the northbound right free flow to keep that traffic moving to help relieve that northbound approach. And so there are some things there that frankly we need to get further down the road and the construction needs to get closer to being finished on Pipkin, and the county needs to get comfortable with how that intersection is going to operate without the development, and then start working at different timing plans to make that happen. And so we've got conditions in there to address that. We're also...
Does that include a left turn lane?
We've got, on northbound Yates, that approach is being reconstructed. I've got a diagram here that shows that we'll have a full northbound left and a full northbound right.
Does that have pedestrian anything?
We're going to have sidewalks. The county is putting sidewalks down the west side of Yates, all the way to connect in with everything that's down by Wagner. There's going to be pedestrian connectivity within the development, all the way, including up to Town Park Boulevard. The Yates Road intersection will have full crosswalks at Pipkin. And then down at Geico at Aviation Drive, that intersection is going to be signalized as well. So that's going to be a new traffic signal with crosswalks. So there's going to be a lot more options for mobility out there.
Great. Good question.
The other thing too is that the analysis included the Medela-Pipkin intersection, which showed up 16-minute delay. If you're trying to go left off of Medela onto Pipkin, that intersection is being signalized with Riverstone. We've got the bond. That's the developers designing the signal now. They're working with the county. We had them kind of study it as a stop intersection, and then had them look at it as a signal. The signal's going to work fine, but again, we want to...
Will be a signal at Riverstone too?
That's going to be at the Medela Riverstone entrance there at Pipkin.
Sounds dangerous.
So that's going to help out a lot.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we've got the ongoing improvements that are being constructed by the county. I mentioned earlier, cut-through traffic is a major concern of Town Park, and how we address the trip assignments and the traffic analysis. One of the things that the study showed is that based on the Land Development Code, we would require a left turn lane on Town Park Boulevard at this project's entrance. They're like two trips above what the Land Development Code requires. The problem is, since Mosaic is putting in a right turn lane going into their development, we end up blowing out Town Park Boulevard and making traffic actually move faster through that area. So instead, what we're doing is we're getting the developer to work with the county on including turn lanes on Yates Road with the ongoing construction work out there. So that way, they're only clearing and digging and laying the same asphalt once. And so there's some back and forth that we saw this week where that communication's ongoing right now. So we're going to try to focus as much of the improvements on Yates Road as possible. We are requiring a raised crosswalk on Town Park Boulevard at Song Sparrow Court, which is the first crosswalk within Town Park to the west of the site. So as you're coming in, you'll have to slow down at that crosswalk. I know the representatives of the HOA don't see that as solving their traffic problem, and I agree that there's a lot more that we need to discuss within the neighborhood, but that is something that, there's a nexus with this development that we could put that in as a condition.
Real quick, what's a typical raised crosswalk run?
Oh, I don't know. It's probably, $10,000?
I think we're running somewhere near 10 to 12.
And so it's not inexpensive.
Yeah.
And works well.
And I look at it a little bit different. I mean, in the cost of road development, I think that seems relatively inexpensive.
Right.
But
compared to the millions. Million-mile roads.
But I guess if I'm flipping the bill, yes, it's...
And they're coming into the transit district, just like everybody else out here. And then we're also, the project is on the Pathways corridor, and so we want to keep that in the back of our mind going forward. And so this is the cross section that's under design as we speak. We showed this for the Mosaic project. north is to the right, and so you can see the separated north and right turn lanes. You're going to have two southbound through lanes coming off of Pipkin Road on Yates to Town Park Boulevard. As you start to head south past Town Park Boulevard, then the road will narrow back down to the current cross-section by Wagner Elementary. And so what the county and the developer are working on, this will be the entrance point here, is getting in a northbound left turn lane and then kind of expanding the asphalt to the west to put in that dedicated right turn lane. So it will make sense when it's all said and done. So in terms of the conditions, 252 units, in accordance with MF12, our suburban neighborhood standards. We're again adopting a specific site development plan. We've got requirements in there in terms of buffering, landscaping, preserving the buffer area or the wetland area, addressing mature trees on the site to again try to get it to blend in more with the surrounding neighborhood. Outdoor lighting, same requirements as in the land development code. Our transportation conditions, connectivity, bike parking, another navigation easement agreement, annexation into the transit district. We're also requiring that they do a signal warrant analysis for Town Park Boulevard and Yates Road. It's the exact same condition we have for Mosaic, so we'll be building on that traffic as well, just to make sure that signal's not needed there. But we're also being clear to the Town Park residents as well, as you may not want a signal at that location because that's going to attract a lot more cut-through traffic. And so if warrants are met, we'll look at some other options working with the different stakeholders. And then we've got the requirements for a operational analysis at Pipkin and Yates to look at addressing that AM peak issue. We've got requirements for the site access for Yates and Town Park Boulevard, and then the raised crosswalk at Songsboro Court. Now, related to bedroom count, we've got 126 one-bedroom, 99 two-bedroom, and 27 three-bedroom units. The original plan was for all 356 to be one-bedroom. So this is definitely got a different mix. They are taking advantage of the 10% parking reduction for bike parking on the site. So where they would be required to install 441 parking spaces, they're installing 400 parking spaces. So for 252 units, they're putting in 400 parking spaces. So that is a little different than the previous case.
I've done my numbers. Of course, the one bedrooms make all the difference. So, I don't have a trouble with, I came up with $399, so I'm okay.
We're use a new formula.
Yeah.
Developers are listening. Read approval.
Of course, my question is on the crosswalk. I've seen some, you can go right through them, that won't make any difference. Some you'll go over, and if you don't slow down, your head's going to hit the top of your roof. So
You must drive a Chevy.
I do. But invariably, I think they need to be higher. And so, I want to make sure it's not one of those you just blow through, because I've heard that it's one of the areas of concern is that speed on that particular road. And of course, the argument they've made is the speed's already there, so it's not going to make any difference. But if it did that, it would slow it down. And the initial drag strip component.
Oh, that increased traffic will slow it down.
No, really, though, there's a point to
It'll
that.
slow down.
I mean, we don't
Yeah.
think about that, but the absence of traffic is why I can speak.
Right.
And so it
It's
just,
go fast.
it's a balance.
Exactly.
Yes, that's a good point. Mr. Ruth.
And so I hope that I'm certain it's not lost on the commission, the contradiction between the connectivity that we want. And this is going back again to Town Park's inception more than 2 decades ago with, oh boy, it's a cut through now. Well, it's a cut through
Because we
more or
didn't
less by design. So now we're working to mitigate those speeds and those impacts to the Town Park neighborhood. Greg, is the typical raised crosswalk similar to West Lime by RP Funding Center?
Those might be a little larger. The one in front of
Dixieland Elementary,
Yeah.
they're in Ariana.
Yeah, I like
Probably one of the most recent ones that we've
Yeah,
done.
that is not the drive over one.
Right.
You better slow down on that one.
Ease over that.
Your attention, that's
Yeah.
right. I've
Yes. That's a good one.
experienced that one, but
I found that one.
of course, when we were at TPO meeting yesterday, we know that West Pipkin's not going to be done until the end of '24.
Correct.
So there's going to be a lot more construction going up that way, so it's going to be that much.
Hold on.
I got a general question for you, Mr. Barnby, and that is, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, what we're experiencing here in this portion of our city, is it unlike anywhere else? When you start seeing growth, when you start seeing communities want to come together and build, because you need residential, you need commercial, you will make sure you have safety issues involved with transportation. What's different than what we may see, unless we just don't want it?
Well, and that gets into kind of planner philosophical conversations, is that the big problem, this is around the country, is one of the reasons why rents are so high right now in the rental market is not a lot of people can afford to, and they don't want to purchase a single-family home. And so there's a market for people to live in apartment communities or townhomes, and we're seeing it here, is those are the types of residential uses that seem to get more pushback because of where they're located, usually near neighborhoods, single-family neighborhoods, and generally are a natural transition between commercial or office and those single-family detached. But there's always concerns about traffic, school capacity, and those other things, and this isn't us, this is all across the country. And so, if we talk about housing variety, we have to look at not just one type of home, and for a decade, most of what we saw were single-family detached homes. I think Ada Palms was the one that we had in 90 units in 10 years. So we're starting to see multifamily, and so that's where I think it's probably on the forefront of most people's minds, is that, okay, we've got more apartments coming in. And it's, as we grow, and as our urban area grows and as the region grows, and it's not just about us or Polk County anymore, it's, people commute to Brandon and Lakeland and people commute to Orlando, is that there's people don't want to have to come home at night and mow their grass and all this other stuff, and so they want that type of living. And so with all the units that we have in Southwest Lakeland, and we're, depending on where you put that eastern boundary, we're somewhere between 4,000 or 5,000 units that are under some form of development. The multifamily hasn't caught up yet. We're starting to see it catch up. So we've got Mosaic, we've got this. We're hearing, some other locations that are interested in multifamily. County Line and Pipkin, right there north of the new Publix. We're about to see a site plan for 320 multifamily there. So we're starting at nodes, at intersections in certain locations to see multifamily. And with this area across from Geico and Rich Lafroy's development next to that, and everything as we start heading towards Waring Road and Parkway Corporate Center, we've got an employment center here that needs more residential nearby. It comes back to what does it look like? What is the form? How's it designed? And does it blend in better with the surrounding single family? And that's where we spend a lot of time, as much as we spend on traffic, we spend a ton of time making sure that the buildings are in the right location, the right size, right scale, and we get those details right. Ultimately, the concerns, I think, are still going to be there from folks, because it is a significant change from undeveloped property to an apartment community. But it's again about that balance and trying to get more housing stock in the market in different varieties that people want to take advantage of.
Well, I know certainly we've asked to make sure that we can get as much as we can get. But, and of course, I think my concern would be the parameters, how we make sure this happens. I see even in north of our city limits, where the county is gone, and man, I thought, every time I go out to Walmart North or in that Dorcher Road kind of community, you see new apartment complex almost coming out of the ground. And I'm not saying it's not needed, because I know it's needed. We know we need places to have folk to have places to live and make sure that they can do that, but do it, I think, the right way in respect to traffic, safety issues, and concerns we have. That's the only reason I asked that question.
And that's why we've got to get transit too in the mix. And that's the other part of this is that, the Coral Line is still, hourly unit service. The Red Line is, we've got to get those frequencies up. And that's hopefully that we can start to do that with
And that
this
helps
type
pull the cars off the road.
Right.
Which helps a ton. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. And Chuck, you kind of answered my question. I was curious if the change in density and building height, if that has made a difference in the opposition and the residents' concerns, or if it still remains for the most part as it was at the beginning. And I think that's a good point that I know you highlight this sometimes, but you and your team, oftentimes you're going back to the developer and making changes and asking them to revise their plans and try to, as you said, make the project the best fit for the best location. So I'm just curious, in the context of residents' concerns, is that making a difference when we're lowering the building height and requiring or asking for fewer units?
I think the concerns are still going to be there. Where we are much more comfortable now than 6 months ago is that the developer has worked, I think, extremely hard. I mean, and Philip Scarce and Matt Lyons on our staff have spent hours working with the development team on those details, and they've been extremely responsive to what we heard at the Planning and Zoning Board and what I'm sure you all are seeing through emails and letters as well. But ultimately, I think the concerns are still going to be there. Traffic is the most obvious. I think the other one is going to be school concurrency. Wagner Elementary is at capacity, but with adjacency, they're able to send kids to Southwest Elementary, and that's what the school district is. There's a whole other set of issues there in terms of which schools are at capacity and which ones are way under capacity. That's another conversation. But so there's some things that we have certainly thought about, even beyond what was raised at the Planning and Zoning Board meeting, to try to at least say that this is, again, a logical project that's appropriately designed in the right location, in the right scale. And that's a lot of time spent on that.
Commissioner Mann.
Thank you, Mayor. So I always kind of find it, when I'm talking to people, just sort of, it is kind of a shift, for our city to be integrating more multifamily everywhere. But like, if you think about what you all are having to do is kind of what, when you get someone like a Drummond who does an Oak Bridge, they're thinking of it holistically, and they're thinking about all of those best practices, and they've got the apartments, and then they've got the condos, and they've got the homes, and the homes can even be gated, and they're all sharing roads, and they're all have access to Target and Publix, and it's such a beautiful best practice, and I try to use that, when I'm talking to people, like, we don't have the luxury. We're patchwork quilting different pieces of property together. But if our planners are able to work with the developer with that mindset of what the best practice is, you can't necessarily go and buy that big, I've heard Commissioner Reed say, we wish we could just buy another big tract of land like that and just do it like Utopia. We don't have that option, but I'm just so grateful that, as this has been happening, you're looking at that Oak Bridge, so to speak, best practice and saying, okay, well, here's, whether it's the Lockheed and the multifamily or this one with the surrounding neighborhoods, doing your best to try to create that best practice, even though it's different developers and there's neighbors who've already lived there and, experience life a different way. But, it is interesting, Brian, you say that about the cut through is all of a sudden like a problem when you think, like, that was intentionally designed in Oak Bridge. It was no one's problem. Like, it was intentional and it was a best practice. So I think the more, the marketing person in me wants to help, the more neighbors talking to neighbors and citizens talking to citizens to, oh, well, that makes sense. Like, that's not a problem. That's actually something that will help solve and mitigate traffic, and it'll help in the long run when we make some of these concessions and we work with developers and we hear from neighbors. So I don't know. I try to, it helps my mind see a picture. So I don't know if that's helpful when you talk to neighborhoods or people to go, remember how when you go to this neighborhood, that's how that already is. Do you think that's a bad thing? I don't think those neighbors have ever complained in Oak Bridge that that's how they're arranged.
And that's where, and kind of circling back to the concerns of Town Park, I mean, they've got real concerns and real issues that we as a city need to address. And, that was our first new subdivision in a long time, and so the roads are wider, I mean, they're 24-foot wide, they're straighter, there are no street trees along them, so it does have a different feel than what our code requires today, and we need to address that. And so that's where the residents out there do have some real concerns that we need to work on, but don't think it's not related to this project or the other one either. It's that we've got to look at our, how do we, goes back to the street design and other things we need to do to slow the traffic down and make the speeds more manageable. So that's going to be a big issue that I think we're going to end up focusing on Monday.
Do you have any other points in this?
No.
Well, I think this represents, though, a good conversation with respect to Commissioner Madden's point just now that there are many different housing types that we have to continue to grow, and we have lots of pressure to grow, and we'll continue to, despite the blips that we'll see economically. August sales over a year ago, the average home in Lakeland was $313,000, actually in Polk County, 27% higher than a year ago. So when you think about that number, that tells you all kinds of messages. For one, and we know apartment rents are high. That means we don't have enough apartments, and it means we don't have enough homes. And so we recognize some of our younger apartment dwellers want flexibility, but beyond that, they're going to some housing and buying it when they can't justify the mortgage that they could have in housing. So we have to continue to work on all fronts on this in terms of growth. And if spaces like this that really infill well for multifamily can solve problems as well as cause some things that have to be changed and modified to make them suitable for that expansion.
Traffic is one issue. We've got a whole other affordability, environment. We've got all the other things we've got to look at too, and it's balancing.
So we have to be good at that intentionality. Commissioner McCarley.
Is there, not to get on a rabbit hole, but is there a way we can help you with this concurrency piece of schools? Because when you say some are going to get pushed to Southwest Elementary, that's more cars on the road and car line going another way outside of the segment that they're in. So how can we as public officials help you with that?
One of the things that we've heard from Superintendent Hyde is that, we've got all these schools, like Wagner's a good example that's operating over capacity, but they've got so many schools primarily in like more of the central city locations that are operating at 40% capacity, 50% capacity. Tenant Rock High is the same thing. And they have talked about a redistricting plan. Last I heard it was like a 3-year plan where they would start at elementary, middle, and high. But that's a school district issue, but I don't, if that's something that was strategic planning, or if there are other avenues to at least bring that up, because a lot of the folks out here too, a lot of the students in middle school are getting bused to Sleepy Hill Middle. 15 miles.
When all the people around Southwest Elementary are driving their kids to Lincoln.
Right.
So, it's crazy.
Well, I just, from a political standpoint, like just if you want, and maybe not right now, but in the essence of time, but if there's something that we can do to leverage supporting you all as staff, let us know how to do that.
I think that we can talk about it internally and see what our options are, but I think that that's a great conversation to have and very timely, and
we would be there.
Yeah. Totally.
The superintendent's rezoning effort, I think, has to come before we talk about changing how the state determines or tells the school districts to determine.
That's so broken. Okay. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. And Chuck, just for future, we've talked about this in the past one time, but let's take example, Florida Polytechnical, the big piece out there, that I would hope when you meet with them that we could do an internal commercial node in the middle so everybody filters in, and new apartments along University Boulevard, and then single family, but then in the middle, everybody feeds in like we talked about out there, but it should have been done. But hopefully you can convince them to do a central commercial node in the center versus on the peripheral.
The good news with that is that when that DRI was rescinded and we went to PUD on that, the commercial town center remained, and then the commercial shifted. There was a regional mall that was planned at one point. That's moved, commercial has moved over to the Parkway Pittsburgh interchange. But that commercial node, where Research way next down, and we've got the on-street parking, the whole intent of that is to have commercial that fronts directly across from the university. Now, the university was supposed to have buildings facing the commercial, and when that plan changed, there's a little bit of a disconnect, but we've held the line that there needs to be commercial there. We haven't heard from anybody about, because most everything out there lately has been business park logistics type development, but we've got those entitlements that are still in place for commercial right there, so we do have a true new town mixed-use development.
If possible, let's go on to the next one, because I think in the interest of time, we need to. Number 3.
Chuck covered both 2 and 3. 2 is the comp plan amendment related to this, and 3 is the modification of PUD.
Okay.
So that takes us down to, utility committee.
We only have one item for utility committee, under the utility portion of the agenda. That is an agreement with Turbine Diagnostic Services for an upgrade to the control systems for 2 diesel generators at the McIntosh plant, as well as gas turbine 1, which is a 17 megawatt peaking unit, as well as the diesel generators are also peaking units that are used. These control systems have not been upgraded for approximately 14 years, so it's time to do that. And since the closure of Unit 3, the gas turbine 1 has been used quite a bit, particularly in the summer months. So we've been noticing, staff has been noticing that there have been some recent issues, and it's time to upgrade those because the existing controls are obsolete. And this is Turbine Diagnostic Services is also has been determined as a sole source vendor. They're the original equipment manufacturer of the controls, and then once approved by the commission, they will be installed and integrated by this company, which is scheduled to be during an outage in 2023. The total cost of this is $237,086, and that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY23 budget as well.
And that upgrade, Steve, gives us an opportunity to improve some of the ways that we can continue to keep it updated over time?
Oh, absolutely. And Steve Reiner, plant manager. Yeah, absolutely. It helps us do that, as well as right now we can't control these units from our control room at Unit 5. We have to go to the units to do it. So we will functionally make the HMI, the human-machine interface, in the control room functional, so they can start and stop the diesel generators and MACGT1 from the control room. That way, if we have an issue and we need them immediately on, they can push the button and start it, instead of having to send folks to the units, potentially in a rainstorm or a thunderstorm. And it'll help us with troubleshooting. We've had, issues with valves and so forth, and so it provides a lot of those different upgrades, and circuit boards that currently are hard to get will be now easier to get, so we can keep these machines available and maintain our capacity where we need it.
Does this measure things like bearing shifting, or is that a different system? Like the turbine spins in terms of something starting to vibrate?
With the vibration monitoring, we have, the units do have Bentley, Nevada vibration indication, the GT1 does. And that gets incorporated into the whole system, looking at that when you start up, you go through your criticals and you hit 3,600 RPMs, which is 60 hertz, and then we flash the field and we come on the grid at that point. But yeah, it incorporates all that. To me, I got to be honest, I was surprised at how inexpensive it was to do it. I was hesitant to do it because I thought it was going to be like $1 million. And when I saw the price, and to be able to, move my controls and be able to do it from Unit 5 is, because right now, these are the only machines we can't start and stop from Unit 5. When we test Winston weekly now, we start and stop from Unit 5.
Wonderful. Interesting.
So it's, we can start and stop Larson from Unit 5. We do run it from Larson, but we're trying to have a centralized control room, and that's part of the process we're going through to improve the overall reliability of the power plant.
The exception would be Rice. Would it have its own control room?
It'll have its own also, but it's also going to be able to be started from Unit 5.
Wow.
The goal is to have everything functionally be able to start from Unit 5.
Cool. Any other questions by commissioners?
I have one, this is kind of related but unrelated. We were at TPO meeting yesterday, they gave us a state plan they're working on for EV vehicles and stations. What would it cost to build a 5 megawatt facility?
For electric vehicles?
Yeah.
Well, that's really not my area. That's Scott Bishop's area. That's the power plant. So, I mean, I could give you.
I know how much land it takes for solar, if we're going to do solar, but I'd wondered about, because again, if they're going to have big areas for school buses, they're going to charge all their school buses, they need a 5 megawatt for that station.
Buses are there. We're doing 400 fast chargers up by Bridgewater for
Are we, right now?
I believe it's about $30,000 per fast charge.
And this is the quick, 550 megawatt, kilowatt, megawatt, yeah.
Right, so for each one, I believe it's about $30,000 for the fast charge and about $10,000 or $15,000 for the not so fast charge. The other key is you got to get the infrastructure there.
Yeah.
Because to do fast charge, you need 480. You don't need, it's not 120. It's going to be 480 volt power. So you may have to install transformers and different things to based on the feeders and then land and where you want to put it. But we're definitely moving towards more and more charging for electric
And
vehicles.
is this a good profit center, you think?
Oh, I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you
because you got to build it then, you got to charge them.
You need to support more power plants.
When I asked the question yesterday, and they couldn't tell me, was, what does it cost to charge your car? I mean, you charge by the hour, in a minute?
It's by the kilowatt.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a kilowatt charge.
And how long does it take? What do we make to charge?
20 to 30 minutes on a fast charge.
Yeah, fast charge.
Okay, and how much does that cost?
It's not exactly. It's very
Consumer,
Yeah.
that's what he means.
Yeah.
It's fairly inexpensive. I don't know how many kilowatts it is, but it's
Like 10 bucks.
It's more than it's more than
it's maybe a lot
gasoline,
less.
isn't it?
I have a cousin that has a Tesla, and it's $7 to
I was
charge.
going to say, it's very.
Overnight?
it's very
$7.
expensive.
Overnight, okay.
For quick
Well, it's
charge.
done on fast charge.
Fast
Fast
charge.
charge done in 20 to 30.
Either way, it's.
Well, is that the supercharge?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would think the demand for that, at least in the proximity of the roads, is that system.
Well, even, not to belabor the conversation.
And we're on the wrong
but when we saw the map, for those that was there, comparatively speaking, what Lakeland's done and where we moved
Yeah,
it,
we're ahead of it.
we're ahead of some other areas in the county.
Right.
It's like, wow, I'm not surprised, but seeing how we were positioned compared to other areas of the segments of the county.
So you tie that into your control office.
Right, we'll get on it.
No other questions, then we are finished with that topic. And we're not going to do any sharing time because we were delayed for Mr. Sullivan.
So we do have one other item on the agenda.
What am I missing?
The selection of the interim commissioner.
Oh, yes, sir, I apologize. I did that last time. Because we're so excited about it.
Thank goodness for Paul.
Okay, so we do have the agenda teed up to select the interim commissioner to fill the upcoming vacancy on Monday. We had the presentations from the candidates this past Monday, and I know a few of you were not able to attend that, and hopefully you had the chance to look at that at this point. And if you did, you will see that at the end of that meeting, we were discussing the process for whittling the candidates down and facilitating the discussion as to the selection, and the desire of the commission was to rank the top four candidates, and then on Monday, and submit that ranking on Monday, and then proceed from there with the discussion and an ultimate selection. The charter simply requires that the commission select the intercommissioner by a majority vote of the members of the commission. The ranking and all that is simply y'all's process to facilitate your discussion and deliberations. We've been knocking around the ranking process the last couple of days as to what the best way to do that is, and have basically come up with two different approaches to that. One would be, and I know that the desire of the commission was to not rank all 8 candidates, but just simply rank the top 4. So one way to do that is simply to have the commission, specify who your top choice is, who your second choice is, who your third, who your fourth choice is, and then we would run a spreadsheet and tell you, and all this would happen at the end of the meeting on Monday, and we would tell you who cumulatively amongst all the commissioners was your number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Another way to do that, though, and this is Kelly's brainchild, but I think it has some merit for consideration as well, is instead of ranking the top 4 candidates, you simply specify without ranking who your top 4 are. And so, there are advantages and disadvantages to both approaches. With the first approach, you're going to end up having someone that's number 1, someone's number 2, et cetera. That's going to make it a little bit difficult to have a discussion as to who your pick is when you have this person that's, number 1. With the other approach, that will simply tell you who is in the top 4. I mean, you could have all commissioners select someone as their number 1 pick, and all commissioners select someone as their number 4 pick, and they would each have the same amount of points. That doesn't tell you who number 1 is and who number 4 is. That nonetheless gives you some leeway on Monday to have a discussion without having, this ranking in your face.
And I actually thought that's how it was. I thought it was we were just giving you 4 names. I didn't know.
That's what I thought.
I didn't know we were ranking them. So
I
that
thought we were just given 4.
That's good then.
And I like that better because then we talk about 4 people.
Correct.
And then we do another vote on that 4. So I'd like to think about how do you want the second vote to look? Yes, Commissioner Walker.
Well, as I give some thought to the process, and as I learned, my colleagues have decided to go the route they were looking at today. And again, I like the approach, not ranking, but just select your 4. And once you get those 4 among us, then something that I've seen done in some of the organizations is that you then, would then select. And those 4, whoever those 4 are, you'll 1, 2, 3, 4.
Or would you select 2? That's...
Well, it's going to come out to be that way. I would think.
It would rise.
It would rise to that.
Right.
Because once you select your 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to see among the 7 of us
Who the
2 are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, I think the fallacy of that, if there may be 8, if we don't put a ranking 1, 2, 3, 4, there may be 8 people on the list. I could pick 2. I could pick 2, 1 and 2. There may be 2 more down the list, and there's going to be there could be 8 people on that list. As opposed, if you number 1, 2, 3, 4, there still could be 6. But if you have I don't know if you're going to do 10, 8, 10 down, or go 0 down. I don't know which one how you want to do it. Number 1 is 0, and number 4 is 4, or number 1 is 10. And number 0 and number 4 is 2. Y'all are going to have to figure that out.
Yeah, we'll get
But I
that
think
worked
if you
out.
just say, here's 1 through 4, here's my 4 without any number, there could be 8 people on that list. And then where do you start? Then you got to start all over again. You're going to put a number, you're going to have to rank somewhere.
I would think, though, there'll be a plurality that
I would think there might be
evidences
a
itself.
plurality as well.
And if we got to that, and that were the case, you're right,
We
we'd
have
just
to.
have to figure out a way to do it again.
Well, I'm trying to streamline the process.
Yes, me too.
I don't want to be there all day, and I don't want to, like I say, the objective is, I don't want our number 8 to feel like number 8. I think we've had 8 great candidates, and of course, that's but I don't want anybody to feel that they weren't strongly considered. And again, if you pick 4, they don't know if they're number 5 or number 8.
So Commissioner McLeod.
I was just trying to follow the different scenarios and possibilities. But I think hearing everyone, in my mind, it was we submit 4 names, and then from that, there's a collective top 4, but not necessarily ranked as to who's the collective number 1 and number 4.
Right.
And so you would be able to do that, pull out that collective top 4,
To
because
discuss.
I don't think you would have 6 or 8 in the way you would tally. Are the candidates in
Unless there was a
the top
tie.
4 in a majority of our picks, if that makes sense. So you would have that collective top 4, and then from there,
That's where your discussion would be.
We discuss.
begin discussion. And
So would you recommend that we do that vote initially when we get there, given the fact we'll all have heard the interviews, and not have discussion and just get to the 4?
Get to the 4.
Yes.
Yes.
Then have-
Gives us a starting place, in my
This is
opinion.
your starting point for discussion.
So what
In case that wasn't
suggest
That
is
was our discussion.
Kelly has some
That was our long discussion.
Yes.
We want to get it down to 4.
Yeah, Kelly has some scoring sheets that she'll pass out here for you to take home with you and
Yes.
submit
I was gonna ask about that.
at that time on the agenda on Monday, and then we will possibly take a brief break and tally those. Yeah, Commissioner
So
McCarthy.
if you're saying, but these aren't scoring sheets, these are our list.
That's your list.
So that's a
Your short list without numbers.
without numbers, so let's be abundantly clear, because calling it a scoring sheet goes back into the realm of
No,
somebody being number
Not
8
right,
crime.
but your
Yes.
list of
Okay.
Your list of 4.
Yeah. Got it. Thank
And
you.
your name is on the form because you cannot vote in secret. So
Right.
be sure, they're in order by your seats, but so take yours and pass it
Do you
down.
recommend we put them in alpha order, so there's no like,
The spreadsheet's already in alpha ordered. You don't have to worry about
Yeah,
that.
and you're-
What you put on the form, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So actually, this can be brought to the meeting completed.
Exactly.
You were supposed to bring that to the meeting.
Okay.
So you suggested we put them alphabetically then?
It doesn't matter, just list form, your top four.
Right.
I'm going alphabetical, that way
I'm
there's
doing
no.
alphabetical.
Can I ask a question?
top fifth.
That's right. So at what point, we hand in our names, they're tallied. At what point do I say, I make a motion for blank? When do we get to have a motion, or when are we expecting that we can at least have a motion to up or down?
Well, I would think we'd get to, personally, I would love to pick between, I think, top 2 out of the 4. So have the group.
Okay.
Which is by a discussion. And the way we get to that is do one more vote after
got
the
to rank.
discussion.
You're gonna have to rank it.
And you have a 1 and a 2.
So you would say ranking via the Charlie Brown paper as opposed to I make a motion for candidate A and everybody just says yes or no? Okay.
Well, I think, once that's done, as you indicated, Mr. Mayor, once you got these, and then boom, we find out from staff, okay, how they came out. You do your full rankings then. And at that point, I believe that's when you're gonna see how I think we come up with the 1 and 2.
Commissioner McCarthy.
I'm good, I'll defer to you.
So we could come up with 2.
Yeah.
Or just another vote to come up with the top 2 out of our group. So we'd take those 4 names, following our discussion on those 4 people. We'd vote, then each of us on paper for our top 2. And we'd have one of those be the plurality vote of the top 2, no? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I would think so.
Well, I
You
see
might,
mixed faces,
if we picked 4 and ranked them 1, 2, 3, 4, some person may be number 1 right off the bat.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, that's why I was
That's what I
asking,
think.
and that's why I was asking about being able to just make hey, it seems like this person's number 1.
1 through 4, and then if everybody's 5 people want same guy number 1,
Then you got it.
then he's in.
Yeah, that's it.
Or she.
Or she. And I think that's what I was trying to, share.
I said that too.
You get that, once we get the paper and,
You may be
How we-
surprised.
yeah, you got your 1 out the back.
There might be
That's it.
7 for one person.
But we can
per
keep
guy.
talking, we don't even know. We'll know at the end of our.
So what is the second step? Just tell me after the 4.
You rank again.
We have discussion on the 4.
Yeah, another read I say you rank.
One more form like this, only that
1,
one
2,
we're
3, 4
ranking
though.
with a 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yes, and you may come out with your number 1.
Agreed?
Could easily come out with your number 1.
It's just one more process.
It's one more thing.
So one more sheet, but that sheet's ranked.
Yes.
Okay. And okay, I think that.
But there could be 5, and then we rank 4, then you rank, then you go 4 from that, yeah. Or it could be 6.
Yeah, you could have a tie on the 4th one,
Yeah.
for example. Yeah. Okay.
Time to go home.
All right, time to go. All good? Yes, sir.
One last thing, before we go to the next thing. I was asked last evening at the Resident Cities, who would be the board member for Lakeland. So that's something we need to decide on, because the next board meeting is coming up in a few days, November. I forget the date, but whoever that person is, we're going to get in contact with Bobby Green.
My
Who's exec.
recommendation would be Commissioner McCarthy.
It's up to you all, Okay. And I can talk to you about that. We can talk.
Everybody good on that? Okay. Commissioner McLeod, you good on that?
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I'm looking for whether that was a weight off or a weight on.
I said that too.
Yeah.
Am I still, are we still gonna have you, Mr. McLeod, still on the legislative policy committee? Or
Not this
He
year.
rolled on.
So you're doing this, sir?
I guess so.
Well, we gotta make
Sure,
sure,
why
you had you signed up yet? Because we're gonna get you, well, we're gonna get her in the queue.
Okay, get her in the queue.
I'll make sure I make a call, because we got to get you in the queue, because the next meeting is coming up in this month too. The legislative policy conference.
Oh, good.
Where you need to go to. Probably.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, I don't want Lakeland to be,
A lot more conferences.
I don't want Lakeland to be left out, you know, I just want to make sure we got.
Appreciate you bringing that up. We're 15 minutes off, and so we can go and do the city manager review. Would you like to do a bathroom break or not?
Please, and a little, I saw some birthday snacks too.
Please do 5 minutes. Please do 5 minutes. So let's start right at 10 till.
I think 4 days.